Hey kids, welcome back. Be sure to subscribe so you get updates on all of our new videos. Thanks for joining me at Storytime for Kids. Today's story is another one by Hans Christian Andersen called What Happened to the Thistle? Round a lordly old mansion was a beautiful, well-kept garden. Full of all kinds of rare trees and beautiful flowers, guests always expressed their delight and admiration at the sight of its wonders. The people from far and near used to come on Sundays and on holidays and ask permission to see it. Even whole schools made excursions for the sole purpose of seeing its beauties. Near the fence that separated the garden from the meadow stood an immense thistle. It was an uncommonly large and fine thistle, with several branches spreading out just above the root, and although it was so strong and full as to make it well worthy of the name Thistle Bush, no one ever noticed it, save the old donkey that pulled the milk cart for the dairymaids. He stood, grazing in the meadow hard by, and stretched his old neck to reach the thistle, saying, "You are beautiful. I should like to eat you." But the tether was too short to allow him to reach the thistle, so he did not eat it. There were guests at the hall, fine, aristocratic relatives from town, and among them a young lady who had come from a long distance, all the way from Scotland. She was of old and noble family, and rich in gold and lands. A bride well worth the winning, thought more than one young man to himself. Yes, and their mother thought so too. The young people amused themselves on the lawn, playing croquet and flitting out among the flowers, each young girl gathering a flower to put into the buttonhole of some one of the gentlemen. The young Scotch lady looked about for a flower, but none of them seemed to please her, until, happening to glance over the fence, she spied the fine, large thistle bush, full of bluish red, sturdy-looking flowers. She smiled as she saw it, and begged the son of the house to go get one for her. "That's Scotland's flower," she said. "It grows and blossoms in our coat of arms. Get that one yonder for me, please." And he gathered the finest of all the thistle flowers, though he pricked his fingers as much in doing so as it had been growing on a wild rose bush. She took the flower and put it in his buttonhole, which made him feel greatly honored. Each of the other young men would gladly have given up his graceful garden flower if he might have worn the one given by the delicate hands of the Scotch girl. As keenly as the son of the house felt the honor conferred upon him, the thistle felt even more highly honored. It seemed to feel dew and sunshine driving through it. "It seems I am of more consequence than I thought," it said to itself. "I ought by rights to stand inside the garden and not outside of the fence. One gets strangely placed in this world. But now I have at least one of my flowers over the fence, and not only there, but in a buttonhole." To each one of its buds, as it opened, the thistle bush told of this great event, and not many days had passed before it heard, not from the people who passed, nor yet from the twittering of little birds, but from the air, which gives out far and wide the sounds that it has treasured up from the shadiest walks of the beautiful garden and from the most secluded rooms at the hall, where doors and windows are left open, that the young man who received the thistle flower from the hands of the Scottish maiden had received a heart as well, and her hand. "That is my doing," said the thistle, thinking of the flower she had given to the buttonhole. And every new flower that came was told of this wonderful event. "Surely I shall now be taken and planted into the garden," thought the thistle. "Perhaps I shall be put into a flower pot, for that is by far the most honorable position." It thought of this so long that it ended up by saying to itself with the firm conviction of truth, I shall be planted in the flower pot. It promised every little bud that came that it also should be placed in a pot, and perhaps have a place in the buttonhole, that being the highest position one could aspire to. But none of them got into a flower pot, and still less into a gentleman's buttonhole. They lived on light and air, drank in sunshine in the day and dew at night. They received visits from bee and hornet who came to look for honey in the flower, and who took the honey and left the flower. "The good-for-nothing fellows," said the thistlebush. "I would pierce them if I could." The flowers drooped and faded, but the new ones always came. "You come as if you'd been sent," said the thistlebush to them. "I am expecting every moment to be taken over the fence." A couple of harmless daisies and a huge thin plant of canary grass listened to this with the deepest respect, believing all that they heard. The old donkey that had to pull the milk cart cast longing looks toward the blooming thistle and tried to reach it, but its tether was too short. And the thistlebush thought and thought so much and so long of the Scotch thistle to whom it believed itself related, that at last it fancied that it had come from Scotland, and that its parents had grown in the Scottish arms. It was a great thought, but a great thistle may well have great thoughts. "Sometimes one is of noble race, even if one does not know it," said the nettle bush growing close by. It had a kind of presentiment that it might be turned into muslin if properly treated. The summer passed, and the autumn passed. The leaves fell from the trees. The flowers came with stronger colors, but less perfume. The gardener's lad sang on the other side of the fence. "Up the hill and down the hill, that's the way of the world still." The young pine trees in the wood began to feel a longing for Christmas, though Christmas was still a way off. "Here I am," said the thistle. "It seems that I am quite forgotten. And it was I who made the match. They were engaged, and now they are married. The wedding was a week ago. I do not make a single step forward, for I cannot." Some weeks passed. The thistle had its last solitary flower, which was large and full and growing down near the root. The wind blew coldly over it, and the color faded, and all its glory disappeared, leaving only the cup of the flower, now grown to be as large as the flower of an artichoke, and glistening like a silvered sunflower. The young couple, who were now man and wife, came along the garden path, and as they passed near the fence, the bride, glancing over it, said, "Why, there stands a large thistle. It has no flowers now." "Yes, there is still the ghost of the last one," said her husband, pointing to the silver remains of the last flower, the cup of the flower in itself. "How beautiful it is," she said. "We must have one carved in the frame of our picture." And once more the young man had to get over the fence to break off the silvery cup of the thistle flower. It pricked his fingers for his pains, because he had called it a ghost. And then it was brought into the garden, and to the hall, and then into the drawing room. There stood a large picture, portraits of the two, and in the bridegroom's buttonhole was painted a thistle. They talked of it, and of the flower cup they had brought in with them, the last silvery shimmering thistle flower that was to be reproduced into the carving of the frame. The air took all their words and scattered them about far and wide. "What strange things happen to one," said the thistle bush. "My firstborn went to live in a buttonhole, my lastborn into a frame. I wonder what is to become of me." The old donkey, standing by the roadside, cast loving glances at the thistle and said, "Come to me, my sweetheart, for I cannot go to you. My tether's too short." But the thistle bush made no answer. it grew more and more thoughtful, as if thought as far ahead as Christmas, till its budding thoughts opened into a flower. When one's children are safely housed, a mother is quite content to stay behind the fence. "That is true," said the sunshine, "and you will be well placed, never fear." "In a flower pot or in a frame?" asked the thistle. "In a story," answered the sunshine. And here is that story. Thanks for joining us today. Happy story time. See you next time. Bye.